Okay, so we're going to go over some basic drawing stuff today, especially in faces, and just the idea and theories about drawing. I always start drawing. Well, teacher Matt is actually online somewhat, does some instructional stuff. But it's something that I learned from him that I still always do when I start to draw. And it's just like kind of some warm-up exercises. That's just doing circles over and over again, just to loosen up your hand and wrist, and your eye-hand coordination, and then figure eights too. And he would always say, do it until people think you're crazy. But this kind of exercise and just this kind of attitude towards drawing is something that I really picked up from him more than anything else. Is that this is a mental and physical activity that you have to warm up for. You approach it like it's a sport, like you're a ninja, you're an athlete, it's a performance. So you don't just go into it cold. And it also gives you a place to start off, because a lot of times a blank page can be very intimidating, daunting. You don't know what to do, and if you kind of go ahead and screw up the page, and then maybe have some stuff that you start out with, basic shapes, just to get your curves and stuff. If I only just went straight in and did a piece every time instead of warming up, I just can't imagine what I would be producing. Not very good, basically. Incredibly stiff stuff. So I just kind of get more complex with shapes, start getting into more gestures of bodies, trying to get it down. And you want to get to be okay with yourself not making things that look good. This is something that everybody gets really obsessed with when they draw, and then it gets them stuck on things. Because once they have something that they're okay with, or that they're, whatever, that's what they'll draw over, and they won't want to go experiment, and basically they don't want to go learn new things because they just want to draw the same thing over and over again. Now, if you do need to do that to some extent to keep yourself drawing, because if you're just learning stuff all the time and it's not working out, then you're going to be really basically demotivated, because you're going to think you're an awful artist. So you kind of do a balance of keeping yourself motivated, happy with drawing, and getting compliments or whatever, good feedback from other people, and then also going into that area where things aren't as fun. And you will eventually learn how to kind of enjoy the thrill of diving into something that you're not sure about, and then watching yourself come out on the other side, being successful with it, and that'll even build much more confidence than drawing something you've drawn a million times before, or that you already know that you can draw. Really, oftentimes, going the route of doing something that's planned that you can do, it starts to make bad drawings, basically. You may be able to keep the technical part down, but there is the technical part of drawing, and then there's the art side of drawing. And this right here is where you want to be. Venn diagram. Venn diagrams explain about this much of life right here. It's probably, I don't want to use up the whole world to draw out that, so we'll just leave it there. So anyway, so on to faces. So basic faces. Remember, I learned this a long time ago looking at some how to draw book, and it was like Superman, and they did this right here. This is a profile. Say this, and then have like a little face mask on there. And it's always been important, because when you start drawing faces and heads, you start at a circle, and people forget the back of the head, and that gives the head so much depth. when you're going to 3/4 or even from the front, you know, you can see all these areas, especially when people are looking down or up. You know, that information about the back of the head is really important for the human mind to process, figure out what's going on when you have a face. So, you know, let the curves happen too. I never try to really get something too specific. Whatever comes out, you know, looking the best, just go with that. And if it changes your idea for what the drawing was going to be, then fine, go with it. There will be times, maybe if you ever do art professionally, where you'll have to get a specific image, and in that case, you know, you'll have to kind of make it more of a forced drawing, and you'll spend more time on the back end to make up for that. But when you're drawing and it's just line art, you have to kind of approach it as this is art in the way it is. You know, it in itself, that sketches or line, you know, drawing, it doesn't have to be colored in. It doesn't have to be inked. This is art, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be finished or framed or whatever, or on a separate piece of paper with a bunch of space around it. You know, my best work happens, you know, in the middle of a sketch page. So, also what I would really recommend is, you know, whatever you're trying to learn or you're practicing on, anatomy, faces, whatever, try to draw in as many different ways as possible. You can get really stuck when you're using a pencil or pen, because all you have is lines. And obviously, we're not described in lines. That's not even like the dark spots usually, the outside, or the, you know, the shading that's simplified. So, and to get away from that is that, you know, you don't approach stuff through outlining it. You know, you maybe do it just through shading. You know, like if you're going to do a face, you know, try not to let yourself do any kind of outlining. And it can really help because it forces your brain, like say in this exercise, to model the face three-dimensionally and to think about what planes, you know, are facing up towards your light source and which ones are going down and are going to be covered by shade and shadow. And, you know, and then an experiment with changing the light source, you know, that, okay, it's over here now, so that's where this gets shaded, and so forth. And another good way is also like to try to do the whole face out of curves, or maybe one curve. You know, like do a down face like this, and the whole thing can be down curves, right? We can open his eyes there. Right. So, there's also as far as curves go, the human body and anatomy is generally all convex curves as opposed to concave, which means basically this, right? There's I don't know what body part this is. We could say it's anything, but you know, let's go to an arm. Sorry, I didn't plan that out there. It's almost all convex, right? And concave, by the way, is the other way, that if we drew an arm like this. This is the inside. I'm sorry, that's the body part. Okay, so there's very rarely, you know, it's always these convex things meeting up, and there's rarely a concave part. And it does happen, like say in the face, there's concave right at the bridge of the nose, right? And then you kind of go back to everything, even when it's mildly flat, you can always kind of just add just a little bit concave curve to it, and it'll add a little more life to it. You know, when you're doing legs that are thin, you know, just add a little bit on there, and that'll give you kind of the extra anatomy, even if you don't know it, because this is not a real line there. So anyway, there's another concave. There's little small concaves, but in general, especially when you're drawing women, the female figure, there's going to be, or Americans in general, going to be a lot of curves. Not going to be a lot of concave places. Okay, so let's go back to the face here. You can learn the measurement somewhere else. There's an eyeball in the middle. There's whatever, however many, whatever they do on faces. But I think it's important to focus on kind of believability over accuracy or symmetry or anatomy, because again, we're drawing lines. This is not real. This is not what anything's ever going to look like. It only works in our brain because it processes symbols, and it can take that simplified kind of thing and work with it. But in general, you're really not trying to make what life is in front of you. You're kind of just making up basically symbols or metaphor for whatever it's supposed to be. So I guess basically the other thing is that we don't really experience reality. We experience how our brain is translating things inside our head, which is similar to drawings. Again, that's why it makes sense to us. So trying to go after reality isn't really necessary. And that's also, we have photographs, we have cameras. We don't need to be making that anymore. When cameras came around, people thought that painting was going to die out, and it really opened it up into all these other places. And I think that's kind of what drawing and art is for a lot of the times. It's because it's the language of the mind. Our mind doesn't experience things exactly like reality. Things are bent, things are caricatured. It's far from how reality is. And it's not just that it's that we're visualizing things wrong. It's that because there's emotional content in the way we view things and experience things. It's not just these dead signals of light that are getting processed. It's kind of everything that happens. Anyway, so I'm getting a little too philosophical there, but I think it is important to have some of those ideas, because we'll cut ourselves off from doing things if we don't know the anatomy or if we're not getting it down right. And a lot of times people that maybe don't have the technical abilities that we do, they'll end up making better art than we do because of the stylization and just kind of what I call, kind of owning the lines, owning the art. And I'm sometimes really bad with hands, gotten a little better, but it was like a really big weak spot. And I kept seeing people do like great hands that weren't, real great with technical ability, or maybe they were, but it wouldn't show in the art. Let's say that. And it kind of got me to have to start really looking at my art in a different way. That it doesn't have to be. You don't have to know all the anatomy. You can fake it, and there's this sort of believability that you're going after in visual expressions. So. Okay, so let's look again at the circle here with the oval. This is going to be more of a downturn 3/4. This is a really, really good face angle to practice, because again, it forces your brain to model what's going on three-dimensionally, as opposed to just measuring it out in this style. So, that got a little bit too big. Okay, so you can see this is a little off, but it still can work. It's art. And I actually could be sketching this a bit different. Alright, well, I don't know what I do. Alright. Okay. And speaking of this stuff that, if you're sketching or you have a different color, it's always good if you know the skeleton. Okay, let's do this little 3/4 here. Okay. Alright, so it's like this. Okay. And then when you come back, there's another color, darker thing. Instead of just inking it, you know, you can. This is when it's a good time to connect the dots with your anatomy knowledge and what's going on the outside. And you can also do this with, if you just want to trace a skull or get some photocopies of some, then let's see here. Yeah, so if you photocopy or trace some stuff out from a computer or Lightbox, you can practice drawing faces over top of it. And I've used kind of messed up there. Alright. We're gonna have to give him a beard to fix this. It's a good place for an example of what I was trying to talk about earlier. That you know, if you fuck something up, excuse me, mess something up, you know, do something to cover it. You know, whatever you need to do. Put the thing on there. I drew his headline, skull back too far, so we have to give him a receding hairline. Again, whatever, gives him more character. Okay. And this works too with the body. If you're, you know, kind of at this point where you're getting these gestures out, remember the shoulders and the hips are almost always going different directions, especially if you're gonna gesture it out like that, right? Like this. Okay. No, it's kind of a little overdone there, but whatever. So, okay, so there's his hips. Then we have to even draw in the anatomy of the skeleton to kind of understand what's going on here, you know. And since this was also a sketch, I can see that it's too wide apart, or that the rib cage was too thin. And so there's kind of where I do this a lot, especially with when I got to get down a pose. Okay, push her on there, and so that my brain will cut off what's going underneath because it's getting a little loud in there. And shade that in a bunch. And you saw me do this earlier with, let's see. Okay, so let me do a pose that I'm not really comfortable with. Let's say that I want her to be laying down, right? I'm trying to describe some of this stuff here. Say her hands like this at the bottom. Okay, so have her this there. It's gonna sag off the side there, I guess. Alright, and then I would go over here and And then go in and say, okay, this is going to go out here. This is going to be in the front, so it's going to be there. This is going to go here. And interesting, actually, this same concept can apply to, once you draw the person to applying the clothes, right? Because a lot of times when you have clothed figures and they have like baggy clothes or something, it's hard to describe it's hard for your brain to model what's going on underneath a bunch of clothes. It's a big t-shirt or something, you have no idea what's going on. So, it's easier sometimes to go in there and say, okay, this is where this is where this is, and that's where that is, right? And then draw the t-shirt over it. Oh, that's where the neckline is, Okay, it should be going down here. Okay, I got too many black lines on top of each other. Let's stop with that. Okay. Okay, there's a very badly drawn woman. We're kind of going on 0 and 2 here on decent drawings. Alright, but you get the idea with this. I probably shouldn't have drawn the red so dark. Made it a little loud in there. I usually use blue. It's much easier to keep it light and to distinguish the difference between what's going on in front and back. So, once you get your front faces down, then you go to, you start learning your profile. Right, and then, your 3/4 is kind of the next one to get down, just kind of in between there. And then you start doing the down 3/4. And then the up 3/4, which is really hard. Okay, it's kind of like that. And 3/4 up, 3/4 down. Both you see a lot in Japanimation because they like to describe anatomy, and it gives it a nice dynamic feel to it. Speaking of dynamic, check out Bern Hogarth if you can. He does stuff called dynamic anatomy or whatever. He taught SVA in like the 50s or something, 60s, and does a great job of explaining, basically breaking down the anatomy into geometric kind of ideas that, like when you have an eye, that it's not round and that there's these lines that are kind of explain the curves and what they're doing. Right. Or his noses will be broken into kind of cubes. Anyway, it just kind of helps you. It's kind of another stage in between drawing boxes and circles to getting a little closer to that anatomy. Also, when you mess up on stuff, like what I used to do a lot, especially like on females, because on women, when you're doing cartoon stuff, it's really easy to mess up and maybe draw too much detail, and sometimes maybe you'll want to turn them into you just turn them into a man if that's easier, because men, you can have as many details and shadows as you want. Or, you know, you mess up on eye, it's too high or too low. Then, you know, I go into cyborg stuff or something, or more messed up, you know, like whatever ideas. You know, it's like, okay, this eye is messed up, let's make her into a pirate, you know, like that kind of thing. That how pirates, there we go, like that. Okay. Or, you know, try to just figure out after that point where all the anatomy is. You know, like, okay, well, she's going to be... We'll just turn her into a skull and figure out where we messed up here. So it kind of can give you that sort of, you know, saving whatever... when you're doing stuff that doesn't turn out right, and you still, you know, you don't want to leave a bad looking thing in your journal. Maybe you can always, you know, have stuff that'll freak your mom out or whatever. Yeah, it's real nice. And let's do some beard here. And a big old nose here. And be real shaded. Okay, and then he's gonna have like this kind of thing, right? Yeah, handlebar mustache, baby. Alright, and a nice big old beard. Got a little line in there because it's not full. Okay. Alright. And I would suggest, by the way, that you know, life drawing is some of the best stuff on learning how to draw in general. Even if you don't like drawing people, our brains know people, human beings, the best. That's what they're geared for, what they've been studying all of their time. And so it's, once you kind of learn that, then everything else comes really easy. You know, whether it's cars or trees or buildings, everything kind of falls into line after you can get that down. Okay, let's give him a receding hairline too. I've been doing a lot of that recently. Nice way to show off their skull. What's going on there? I don't really like doing hair a whole lot, so I just kind of give it this loose thing or whatever. Again, he's gonna have a really big, okay, like thing going on. Got like some airplane wings there. Okay, he's like a colonel or whatever, right? Oh, his shoulder's too far in, up too close. That sucks. Alright, well, so whatever. And you saw how that kind of killed it there. And how would we fix that? I don't know how we would fix that. We'd do this right here. We'd pretend like... Okay, there's the other one, and then we'd act like his head is on a plate. That's what we do. Yeah. Nobody will notice a thing. Okay, that actually didn't work, but whatever. Okay, let's go to normal pencil. I don't always sharpen my pencil the most. I like normal pencils because they get a little wider. I just like to have a little more shading and thicker line. But so let's go back to this kind of idea of we'll give a little bit of outline, and then we're going to go into shading first. And another reason why the shading in this situation works great is because you can kind of feel out where the eye should be, the shape, without having to go in there and do a bunch of lines or erasing or whatever. You know, you can kind of figure it out. That was a little too far in. Okay, so, and you guys may be seeing here from when I started that there's a difference that it kind of warmed up. You know, that it had some like drawings in the beginning that were, you know, even now, because I'm not as relaxed because the camera's on, that I don't turn out as good drawings as I'm capable of. And that's all, you know, sometimes it's the day, sometimes it's how much time I've been drawing, you know. It just depends. You know, again, it's like a performance, and you have good days and you have bad days. And you got to be okay with that to some extent. You know, you do want to always get better or whatever, but you know, to get better, you have to make mistakes, and you have to learn through those mistakes. Okay, so this guy's kind of weird. Okay, this brings me to a good point, actually. Another good exercise is basically doing these circles that go from as dark as your pencil will get to as light as it will get on the outside. And okay, this is cheating, actually, using your finger, because I don't have time to do this right now. That you don't want to see any circles in there. You want to go complete gradient all the way around. And this tests you because of your lines showing, and because in general we're kind of only good at drawing lines in certain angles. You know, if I need to get somewhere, I'll turn it like that. When you have to do this, you really have to blend them all in. The other thing is the pressure that you're putting on there. That you can't get a good gradient if you're pushing into the paper, because when you push hard, it leaves a it actually, you know, embosses the paper. It leaves an indentation, and you just can't blend that out. So, and again, I'm not relaxed enough to get quite to that lightest part. It is, I guess it is a little quicker and easier to start with if you just do a single gradient. Okay, look, so we messed up there. But where we're going to fix that is we just elongate it. And you can do this with some of those cheap pens too. So it's kind of like filling in all of it. You can't let any of those lines show. But in general, when I'm drawing, sketching, I don't spend a lot of time on shading or finishing the piece. And it's interesting, I get from a lot of people, especially kids, are saying, oh, it's not detailed, or it's not finished, or whatever. And just in general, when you're drawing, like, I mean, if I did spend time shading and filling stuff in, doing all this little detail work, after I'd kind of actually finished with the drawing, then I would have spent, you know, about 1/10 as much time drawing, and I would suck that much more. You know, I would suck 10 times as much, because instead of learning how to draw faces or anatomy, you know, where you're learning it, then I would be sitting there and I would only be learning how to, you know, do this, keep a steady hand. It's not even that. I mean, when you're inking stuff and coloring, it's like, you know, you do need to learn those things. But at the same time, if you want to learn how to draw, you know, you got to spend your time drawing and not doing a coloring book. Again, you know, you see that I do these kind of, you know, bit of shading. Even on this one, I haven't spent a whole lot of time on it. But you know, that certain amount of shading is an understanding of the anatomy and what's there, but at a certain point, you know, if you wanted the whole background to be black or have some weird little details, you know, you're wasting your time. If you want to, it's not wasting your time. If you enjoy that, you know, fine. It's just, for me, I've never been interested in that kind of thing. And I'm happy that I thought that way since I was younger. Because I would, you know, the talent that I was born with, that I had when I was in high school, wasn't enough to get me where I am today. So I had to spend a lot of time drawing, and that time needed to be optimized. Alright, so this is stupid, and his neck doesn't work right. He looks like it's kind of glued on there. He's whatevering. So that's definitely a problem with this one. He needs to be more set on there. The shoulder should be ending there. So the other one should be starting there. Okay, let's do another pass to make it darker. Alright, now we're just fucking it up. Mustaches are always fun.